Well, welcome to the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. Up until very recently, the wonderful columns here, the Doric columns and everything, were all boxed in. But my determination was to bring it back to what it was. And there is a bar dedicated to Cecil Beaton, who, of course, did the costumes for My Fair Lady, which was the first musical I ever saw.
Andrew Lloyd Webber is a multi-award-winning global superstar of musical theatre. He has composed and produced some of the world's most famous and commercially successful musicals, including Cats, Evita, and Phantom of the Opera.
So come in here, and we go into the great Drury Lane Rotunda. This is the last great one of its kind.
Andrew runs an entertainment empire, owning 6 West End theatres. In 2000, he bought the Theatre Royal Drury Lane and has spent the last 2 decades restoring it to its original glory.
For me, it's like having one's beautiful country house in the middle of London. And I just walk around it sometimes, and I just can't believe that we've been able to bring it back like this. It really combines my great passion of music and art and architecture. If you like to look up, Rodgers and Hammerstein played here, and that's a fanciful scene with Richard Rodgers playing the piano, and on the right-hand side, a very young Andrew Lloyd Webber listening to his absolute idol.
Born in London in 1948, Andrew grew up in a musical family. His interest in theatre started as a child.
I built this toy theatre at home, which did everything from rock shows to sort of rather serious po-faced plays, which my brother would help me in pushing things around on the stage and doing really terrible musicals. Julian, my brother, is 3 years younger than me, and he developed very, very early on this extraordinary interest in the cello. And of course, he went on to become, probably the leading cellist in the country. My mother was a really extraordinary piano teacher, and my father was an academic musician and a brilliant church organist. But what I discovered was how much really he wanted to be a composer. I would often play him things that I'd done. So I played it to Dad, and I said, "Does it remind you of anything?" And Dad turned around and said, "It reminds me of $10 million. Everybody has a bit of everybody in them. I love taking on challenges, so there has to be some strong person somewhere around. I suppose the thing I would most like to discover is where on earth my love of musical theatre came from, and where the shows that I like to write, where on earth did that come from? So here he is. Magito, a very important member of my family. It's him whose parents should be being discussed, and his bloodline, because he's a Havanese dog from Cuba, and therefore he's a very, very Spanish aristocratic person. But he's Magito, who I bought when I saw the Cats movie, because I thought I needed an antidote, and it's called a dog. And here he is, and he's a very, very lovely boy. And at my advanced age, I have fallen in love with a little dog. And he loves the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, likes the Royal Box, because he likes to sit in that. Here we go, into the theatre. E.T., here we go, come on. It's a good boy.
To help him explore his family archive, Andrew is meeting up with eldest daughter Imogen in his theatre office.
Let's start at the very beginning. Very good place to start. So what have we got here? Oh, was that the wedding?
That, yes, is Mum and Dad. Gosh, my mother's very flowery.
Very flowery indeed. So this, of course, is you with your mum, Jean.
Yes.
Tiny.
On the balcony
tiny
of our
baby.
flat in South Kensington.
But she was also musical as well, so you got it on both sides.
Yeah, but she was a very good piano teacher.
Where your patience comes from, Dad.
Yes, I mean, my well-known sense of...
Yes. quiet patience, yes.
Yeah, I am
comes
quiet
from,
and very
from Jean,
patient.
yes.
Yeah, and never, ever lose my temper.
Never, ever.
That's my granny Molly when she's very young.
She was a strong woman, wasn't she?
Frankly, she was the backbone of the family. We all lived in her flat.
So she was married to a Johnston. They're a clan in Scotland.
They're a clan, yeah.
Yes.
But-
so you're allowed to wear a kilt, aren't you?
Yes, I have the whole regalia.
So she was married to the Johnston, and then he left her and...
Well, I don't know exactly what happened, but they got divorced, very early on, at a time when people didn't really get divorced. And I do know she basically brought up the kids, and they moved from Harrow, which is where they had a house,
Right.
After my uncle was drowned in this boating accident.
That's Alistair.
That would be Alistair.
So he drowned young, didn't he?
Well, he was 18.
It's very, very sad. We found something in your archive, Dad, that might go back a bit further into the maternal side of the
My
family.
goodness.
So there you all are.
That's us, yeah. It goes right back then. And look, they all came to marry reverence.
There's a lot of church.
Oh, we got this guy.
He looks very posh.
Sir Peregrine, yes.
Have you heard about him?
No.
He commanded guards at Waterloo.
Well, perhaps he inspired ABBA. You never know.
Well, you never know. Okay, so that means Thomas is your fourth great-grandfather, and
Yes.
then Peregrine is your fourth great-uncle.
That's
that
right,
would be
yeah.
right. Well, this side of the family, I think, is obviously posher than we possibly thought.
Well, that's interesting. We must find out a bit more about Sir Peregrine. But he's rather distinguished.
A long-forgotten document in the family archive has helped Andrew trace his maternal line back to his 4 times great-grandparents, Thomas and Jane Maitland. The document also shows that his 4 times great-uncle, Peregrine Maitland, was a knight and a general who fought at the Battle of Waterloo. Andrew was made a lord in 1997, but he's discovered that his noble lineage goes much further back. So to find out more, he's come to the Royal College of Arms, where the records of Britain's aristocracy are kept. He's welcomed by Officer-at-Arms Peter O'Donoghue.
I found in my archive this family tree of my mother's side of the family. I was very intrigued by this fellow, Sir Peregrine Maitland, who I really know nothing about.
Well, let's have a look at this, which will shed a little bit more light on Sir Peregrine Maitland. Now, this is a painting of the Battle of Waterloo. The artist tried to capture this very complicated and confusing battle in
Yes.
one iconic moment.
Yes.
That is Wellington.
That's
the Duke of
Wellington himself.
Exactly.
Right. And
Sir Peregrine Maitland features here.
he's a sort of fierce fellow.
Wellington waits until the Imperial French Guard are just coming up to the brow of the hill, and then he turns to Maitland and he says, "Now, Maitland, now's your time." Maitland rallies all of his brigade of guards. They all leap to their feet and fire into the Imperial Guard, and the Imperial Guard are routed. And that's sort of the moment that the battle really is won.
So he was obviously a very brave military man.
Exactly.
This is something that I did not inherit. I don't think Sir Peregrine would have been very proud of me.
Well, there's different types of bravery, but his was to sort of hold your nerve,
Yes.
and then take advantage and strike hard when it's the right time.
It is a turning point, actually, in history, isn't it? Because that was the end of Napoleon.
Yeah, exactly. Thank goodness.
Andrew's 4 times great-uncle, Peregrine Maitland, was caught up in one of the most famous moments in European history, the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, when British forces defeated Napoleon's army. Peregrine's decisions on the battlefield were critical to Britain's victory against France. And, after more than 20 years of conflict, the Napoleonic Wars were finally over.
Peregrine Maitland becomes a national hero. Sir Peregrine was knighted shortly after the battle. So this is a grant of a coat of arms. So this commemorates his great military service.
I came in here some years ago trying to decide on a coat of arms when I went into the House of Lords, and I could never work it out. So now I've got food for thought, although I obviously can't pinch the other Maitland idea, I don't think.
Maybe not. So you could make a reference to it. You could make
I
a
might have
heraldic
to have a
reference.
cat, maybe.
Very, very nice. Cats are very popular.
No, I'm sure they are.
We actually have to steer people away from having too many domestic pets.
No, I think you're right there.
He obviously mentions his own honours.
Yes.
Then he can't resist mentioning his ancestors.
He's obviously very status conscious.
The College of Arms holds more evidence of Andrew's aristocratic ancestry.
So to look further at that interesting family, I've got another manuscript I'd like to show you now. Now, this is a wonderful treasure. Here's the page we want.
This is beautifully done, isn't it?
Yeah. This manuscript is more than 400 years old. So Peregrine it's one of those very, very rare and unusual names,
Yes.
which sort of echoes down the family tree.
Well, I can spot a peregrine here. And then it goes up. So Richard and Katherine.
You've got this line of military figures, these men.
Yes.
But what's incredibly interesting is the power actually comes from the women.
Interesting.
It comes from Katherine.
So she's key to the whole thing.
Exactly that. And it's a way into understanding a lot that was going on during this period. And we are talking here, of course, about the reign of Henry VIII.
Goodness me. So Katherine married twice then.
Her first husband, Charles Brandon, the Duke of Suffolk, so this immensely powerful and wealthy person.
And he died, or?
And he died.
Yes.
And then her second husband, your ancestor,
Yes.
Richard Barty, wasn't a nobleman. He wasn't from that aristocratic background.
So she married down the second
She
time.
married down, yeah. And you're going to want to think about why that was and what the
Well,
circumstances.
maybe she just fancied him. You never know.
Andrew has pushed his family tree back to the 1500s and discovered that his 12 times great-grandmother, Catherine Willoughby, was married twice. First to the powerful Duke of Suffolk, Charles Brandon, and then a much lowlier marriage to his 12 times great-grandfather, Richard Barty. Having uncovered some tantalizing clues about Catherine's life, Andrew is keen to know how the story unfolds. So he's starting at the beginning and heading to Catherine's childhood home in Suffolk, now owned by farmer Mike Gray.
It's quite beautiful. I was thinking the sunlight. It must be absolutely wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm imagining it in glorious.
it's a day to come, Andrew. It's a nice sunny
Yes.
day, I can assure you.
It looks as if this is a sort of almost like a fragment of the house.
Obviously, in your family's time, it would have been a lot bigger house than what it is
And
now.
it's become a farmhouse. But you know what is absolutely stunning about it is the brickwork.
Andrew has arranged to meet Tudor historian Linda Porter in one of the oldest parts of the house.
Gosh, what a room.
And we've got some interesting things to show you in it.
How wonderful.
The first two words are of considerable interest in the context of Catherine's youth.
This indenture.
Yes. Made the 20th day of November
In the 19th year of the reign of King Henry VIII.
in the year 1527.
And that is a signature.
Yes, it's Henry VIII's signature on the indenture.
Goodness. Between the same sovereign lord on the one party and Charles, Duke of Suffolk, on the other party, witnesses that the king hath bargained, sold, and granted unto the said duke the custody of Catherine Willoughby, which she sold.
It's her wardship that's being
Has been sold, yes.
Yeah.
For which bargain, sale, and grant, the said duke shall content and pay unto the treasurer of the king 4,000 marks of lawful money of England. But it does look as if 4,000 marks was paid for poor old Catherine.
What's happened to her is that her father has died the previous year.
Right.
Wardship was a way of securing a well-born child for the future.
Yes.
One that was also lucrative for the crown.
So basically it's a kind of tax.
Yes.
So what age would Catherine have been?
Catherine was 8 at the time that this wardship was
Gosh,
awarded.
it gets worse and worse.
And she was going to move to join the Duke and Duchess of Suffolk at their house at Westhorpe
I see.
in Suffolk.
Out of interest, 4,000 marks. What would that be?
It amounts in today's money to about 1.1 million. The little millionaire in
Yes.
her, far as her.
Well, she didn't get it.
No,
There was
she
a poor
didn't get
price
it.
on her head.
The Willoughbys were a very important family. And for Charles Brandon, there is a really useful financial imperative in allying with them. But Andrew, there is a twist to all of this. This is the next document, which will take the story much further on.
Aha. Looks like a whole load of figures.
It's in code.
Code.
We have a transcription.
On Sunday next, the Duke of Suffolk will be married to the daughter of Lady Willoughby. She was promised to his son, but he is only 10 years old. And although it is not worth writing to your Majesty, the novelty of the case made me mention it.
It's from the Imperial Ambassador, Eustace Chapuis, writing to his master, the Emperor Charles V. The Duchess of Suffolk died in 1533.
Yes.
3 months later, Charles Brandon, the Duke of Suffolk, marries his ward, Katherine Willoughby, and she was 14 years old.
How big was the age gap?
He was 49.
49,
Yes,
and she was 14.
She was 14, yes.
And the marriage went ahead?
It did, yes. Shortly after her marriage to Charles Brandon, they left Suffolk to take up residence at Grimsthorpe Castle.
Grimsthorpe? Well, I've been there quite recently, and I had absolutely no idea that there was any family connection with the place.
To find out more about Catherine's life with her much older husband, Charles Brandon, the Duke of Suffolk, Andrew is heading north to Grimsthorpe Castle, armed with his favourite guide to British architecture.
Well, Simon Jenkins describes Grimthorpe, I rather love this, as grim by name but not by nature. Grimsthorpe is one of the great houses of England, and I have to say I agree with him, but I had no idea that my 12 times great-grandmother was at one point the mistress of the house.
Hello, Andrew.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to Grimsthorpe.
What a joy to be here.
Andrew is meeting the castle curator, Emma Miller, who is related by marriage to the Willoughby family.
We're heading back in time here into the Tudor portraits. So here you've got Katherine, Duchess of Suffolk.
That is Katherine.
That is Katherine. She looks rather stern. There's a hint of a smile. And then next to her, we've got Charles Brandon.
Well, she looks a bit like Henry VIII, doesn't he?
He does. He really does
Well,
look like Henry VIII.
Well, looking at that portrait, she obviously was a woman of steel.
Absolutely.
What do you think she really was like?
I think she was a fascinating character. I just want to show you this. It's an account by Stephen Gardiner, who was the Bishop of Winchester.
My lord, her husband, having invited me and divers ladies to dinner, desired every lady to choose him who she loved best, and so placed themselves. My lady, taking me by the hand, said that for so much as she could not sit down with my lord whom she loved best, she had chosen me whom she loved worst.
So Catherine's being very cheeky. The Duke of Suffolk has said, come and choose who you want to lead into dinner. And of course she couldn't choose her own husband. So she said, come on, Gardiner, I like you least of all these people here, and I'll take you into dinner.
Take you in, yes.
And she wasn't afraid of saying that to him, despite the fact that he was quite a powerful man at the time. She had a dog, which she named Gardiner, and dressed up in clerical robes. It was quite naughty of her.
Well, she clearly didn't conform to anything then much.
No. She absolutely spoke her mind. And that was a dangerous thing to do at times.
In 1545, when she was 26, Catherine's husband, the Duke of Suffolk, died, leaving her a widow and back in control of her own wealth. Andrew's keen to find out how Katherine ended up marrying her second husband, his 12 times great-grandfather, Richard Barty. Historian Sarah Gristwood has come to meet him in the castle's King James room.
Who was Richard Barty, my 12 times great-grandfather?
Well, there may be an answer in this document here. The sermon by the preacher Latimer, who was a great friend of Catherine Willoughby.
Faith is a lady, a duchess, a great woman. She has a gentleman usher that goes before her, and where he is not, there is not Lady Faith.
So
Yes.
Lady Faith is Catherine Willoughby, and Richard Barty, Catherine's gentleman usher.
So, in essence, he was a servant.
Yes, a gentleman's servant, but still nothing like her social equal. He'd been educated at Oxford,
Yes.
just 2 years older than Catherine. But it was indeed very definitely not the kind of grand match she might have been expected to make.
So it might have been love.
Yes, I think it was. And if we want to have a look at Richard Barty, here he is.
Yes, goodness. Certainly a pensive-looking chap. Do you think also that he was a bit of an intellectual stimulant to her?
Yes, I think that's highly likely. They did certainly both have the same religious beliefs.
Yes.
They were very strongly of the Protestant faith. And this, indeed, is the story of your 12 times great-grandparents.
At last, between 6 and 7 of the clock in the dark night, they came to Wesel. Where is Wesel?
It's on the eastern side of the Rhine, so Germany, basically.
And repairing to their inns for lodging and some repose after such a painful journey, they were refused of all of the innholders. The child, for cold and sustenance, cried pitifully. The mother wept as fast, and the heavens rained as fast as the clouds could pour. Now, what's that about?
It's about a very painful adventure. They had to flee abroad, Catherine disguised as a merchant's wife, and carrying the firstborn baby, the daughter, Susan.
Catherine and Richard lived through a time of extraordinary religious change. Under Henry VIII, the crown had broken with Catholic Rome and embraced Protestantism. Henry's son and successor, Edward VI, was a staunch Protestant, as were many of his subjects, including Andrew's 12 times great-grandparents, Catherine and Richard. But in 1553, devout Catholic Queen Mary I came to the throne. Known as Bloody Mary, her 5-year reign saw hundreds of Protestants burned at the stake. Fearing for their lives, Catherine and Richard fled to Europe.
In other words, they were refugees.
Yes, they were.
Having got to Europe,
Yeah.
then what?
Well, they went from pillar to post, often pursued by English agents, sometimes under circumstances of real hardship and danger. And their second child was born, your 11 times great-grandfather, and named Peregrine for their peregrinations, their wanderings.
I didn't know that peregrine actually meant wandering. So after all of these wanderings, did they end up safely?
Well, this shows you what happened next.
The most rare and excellent history of the Duchess of Suffolk's calamity. For when Queen Mary was deceased, the Duchess returned home again, who was of sorrow quite released by Queen Elizabeth's happy reign, whose godly life and piety we all may praise continually.
Catholic Queen Mary died, to be succeeded by the Protestant Queen Elizabeth. Catherine and her husband settled up here at Grimsthorpe, and Catherine lived for another 20 years.
She clearly was an amazing woman, ahead of her times, very, very feisty, very committed, probably very difficult to live with, but an extraordinary, extraordinary personality who I must say I would have loved to have met. We're about to explore my father's side of the family, which is really exciting for me because I know very, very little about that. My father, from a very, very early age, played in churches because that was a place where if you were a working class family, you could find music. All these churches had choirs. My grandfather also, I do know, did sing in church choirs, and he was a plumber, I believe. That's what I've always been told. He never did any plumbing for us, so I can't tell you any more.
Andrew is meeting Anne, his cousin on his dad's side.
Hello.
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 Lovely to see you.
Very nice to see you after all these years.
Do you remember our granddad at all?
A little bit, but I don't really remember. I mean, of course, never met Grandma.
No, she died before we were born,
Yeah,
didn't she?
yeah.
And that was around about the time they were married, which was in 1913, I think.
And their marriage certificate. Profession plumber.
But he was obviously, our granddad, very, very musical.
Yes.
And did a lot of singing and in these. Have you seen any of these?
No, I haven't seen any of these. He looks like one of those sort of either tenor of the time or some kind of illusionist and magician. And you sort of wonder whether or not he wouldn't...
That's brilliant. I think you're spot on with tenor, because that sort of leads into an amazing review at the Conservative Club.
The Rains Park Conservative
Yes,
Club.
that's brilliant, isn't it?
Good heavens. The finest artiste of the evening was, in our opinion, Mr. W.C.H. Webber, a tenor at one of the best West End churches, whose style and voice quality was superb. His interpretation of Thora was first class, and the audience was held spellbound.
Isn't that lovely?
It's lovely.
I think that's really
Lovely.
great.
Yes.
Have you seen this photo?
No. My goodness, what have we got here? This is the Coronation Choir and Orchestra, May the 17th, 1937. So this would have been the coronation of George VI in Westminster Abbey. My goodness.
And our granddad sang there.
Yeah.
He's just down there.
Yes. I mean, the singing plumber in Westminster Abbey. Good thing. Do you think ever there was an act called The Singing Plumber?
I think you could do one, couldn't
sort
you?
of gurgling noises and things. I mean, quite intriguing.
The next thing I've been able to find is our grandfather's birth certificate.
Yes, 1886.
Yeah.
East Battersea. Alfreda Charlotte Honor Webber, formerly Simmons.
Have you heard of, been aware of the Simmons?
No, never heard of the Simmons at all.
It was a surprise to me, that,
I know.
when I found it, yes, Simmons. And then we can go back to the marriage certificate of our great-grandparents.
So they're obviously very much based in Battersea. Alfreda Charlotte Honor, her father's name was Henry Samuel Simmons, and was a London City missionary. I'm really intrigued to know something more about that.
Very humble beginnings, all that.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the help of his cousin Anne, Andrew has pushed his paternal line back 4 generations. And in contrast to his mother's aristocratic ancestry, it reveals a working-class background. Andrew wants to start by investigating his great-great-grandfather Henry Simmons' work as a missionary. Andrew, the ultimate London West Ender, is heading east, where Henry worked. He's come to the 19th century pub, the George Tavern, to meet historian Dr. Victoria Lockhead.
That's nice. Happy in D flat, that's good. I've learnt that Henry Simmons was hugely involved with the London City Mission, but I know nothing more.
I can show you a document. This is a record of his interview.
When he applied to become a member of the mission.
Yeah.
This candidate is not quite 24 years of age, but he's been 6 years a member of Surrey Chapel. He had intended to have become an actor and practiced a little in that line at saloons, like this. He is very quick and ready, and his heart seems much in the work. He is sound in doctrine and well able to deal with infidels. There is possibly a little tendency to self-confidence, but the rough character of our work will tend to keep him in his right place. The fact that he was an actor probably, or wanted to be one, probably stood him in very good stead.
He had a great skill set for being a missionary. He could hold an audience. Henry was the first missionary to visit public houses in the East End of London. It was his initiative.
Was it?
Henry realised straight away that far more people could be met in public houses than going from door to door.
Was his ambition to actually close these pubs?
Not at all. His ambition was to deter the poverty that was consequent upon excessive drinking. But pubs were also the hubs of communities. If you had good news, you'd go to a pub. If you had bad news, you'd go to a pub. People were employed through public houses. They claimed their wages were collected in public houses. They had far broader social function than just being a place for drinking.
I mean, I know that this was one of the poorest areas anywhere in Britain, but I just wonder what it would have been really like to be here.
These are extracts from Henry's journals.
The whole of the houses in Brunswick Street, without one single exception, are inhabited by the fallen. The persons who rent them carry on a system of gain by letting the rooms to these degraded women, ready furnished at an exorbitant rent. Vast numbers of seafaring men are cabbed to the different houses in the street for the worst of purposes. Most of these women tell me that they are unhappy and that they wish to relinquish, if possible, their present mode of living.
Henry's attitude towards the prostitutes was extraordinary. He was compassionate, he was sympathetic. He felt that they were more deserving of his attention, not that they were criminal.
But did he encourage people out of prostitution?
He did. Anyone who wanted to leave prostitution, he could find a refuge place for them. He just wanted to improve the quality of people's lives wherever he could. I'd say he's a real working class hero.
Did Henry ever marry?
He did. He lived with his family in the district, in Christian Street, that was back to back with Brunswick Street, the most notorious street in the East End for prostitution.
Supposed to put it bluntly, he was bringing up his family in a red light district.
They'd have been in the thick of it. Henry took on a new field of special mission in 1865. He became missionary to the navvies who were constructing the great network of railways south of the river. So Henry and his family moved to Battersea.
I'm fascinated to know what happened to them.
Following in the footsteps of his great-great-grandfather, Andrew's travelling to St Mary's Church in Battersea. He's meeting historian Dr. Claire Graham.
Well, I've been learning a lot about Henry Simmons, who I am related to, and absolutely poleaxed, really, by what I learned about his work in East London. And I wondered what brings me to Battersea.
He came here to work in the local factories, pubs, gasworks, railway works, still missionising, but found time, believe it or not, to do something else as well, something which I think will come as a complete surprise. So this is rather fragile.
All About Battersea by Henry S. Simmons. So he's writing about the church here.
He's finding time to write the first written history of Battersea.
This really is almost an architectural guide.
Absolutely.
To Battersea as it was at the time.
Yeah, it is. It was published in 1879, and it's still really, really valuable today because he is describing a Battersea which had just grown up from this little riverside village of which the church was originally the centre into this enormous urban area.
He obviously wrote this at the same time as he was doing his missionary work?
Yes, and bringing up 6 children.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. The next document relates to that, which is a letter written by Simmons himself to the South London Press.
On Saturday the 16th, myself and wife were plunged into deep and unexpected grief. Our dear Edward, who was 10 years of age, fell from the embankment into the River Thames and was drowned. His body was found on the following Sunday after being in the water 19 hours. If a chain had been fastened along the side of the embankment, my darling boy, on rising to the surface of the water, might have clutched it. That's incredibly sad, isn't it? Despite the grim shadow over our household, I feel I am performing a public duty by thus urgently calling your lordship's notice to the unguarded state of the embankment. Yeah, it has a kind of resonance for me, if you don't mind my getting a little emotional, because my uncle, who I never met, Alistair, was drowned. This is so sad because you have somebody who has devoted his entire life to really saving other people. And yes, he's lost his kid in such a very, I'm afraid, kind of ordinary way.
1 minute he was there and one minute he wasn't. Coming back to Simmons's life, the last document I've got to show you is actually his obituary from when he died in 1892.
Who did not know Mr. Simmons and respect him. He had been a missionary for nearly 40 years. I never heard anyone speak ill of him. Kind-hearted, he was beloved by all publicans and customers, workmen and their employers. He always had a kind word for everyone, of whatever class, and all had a kind word for him. He leaves a fragrant memory among the poor. Well, that's a pretty extraordinary obituary for anybody. And somebody who obviously didn't seek fame.
No.
He obviously just wanted to do good work. And I'm rather humbled to have discovered him. A very remarkable man. And for somebody who loves books about architecture,
yes,
this is a book that I'm going to have to somehow get hold of. So
yes.
Do you mind if I just walk away with it?
So far, Andrew's family tree has revealed a powerful Tudor Duchess and a working-class hero. But no musical connections, so he's enlisted the help of genealogist Laura Berry.
I'm very excited to meet you because we've found out a bit about my paternal side. A very, very impressive guy called Henry Simmons, who was an incredible missionary. But the thing that I haven't found out about is anything that suggests the musical side beyond my grandfather.
Well, good news. I've got here a marriage record. This is for Henry's grandfather, Samuel Simmons.
Yes. We, Samuel Simmons and Henry Alexis Magito, do you think that's how pronounced? Maybe it's Magito. Musicians, both of the parish of Portsmouth. The above-named Samuel Simmons and Angelica Alexis, shall we say Magito?
Let's say Magito, it's your family, you decide.
The daughter of the above-named Henry Alexis Magito may lawfully solemnise marriage.
So what's really interesting about this is that it tells us that in your family line, we've got 2 generations of musicians. We've got Samuel Simmons.
Yes.
And then also Angelica's father, Henry Alexis Magito, or Magito.
Well, yes, both musicians.
Andrew has finally found the musical connection he's been looking for. His 4 times great-grandparents are Angelica Magito and musician Samuel Simmons, who married in 1788. Angelica's father, Andrew's 5 times great-grandfather, was also a musician, with the intriguing name Henry Alexis Magito.
Do we know any more about that?
Well, the Magito surname is incredibly unusual.
Yes.
Here in England, at least. I did have a sort of dig around on the British newspaper archive, and the earliest record I could find for that surname, at least, dated from 1741. And this is an advert in the Newcastle Courant.
For Mr. Hallam's company of performers at the Moot Hall in Newcastle. The town will be entertained by his famous Dutch and French rope dancers, tumblers and balance masters, particularly by Mynheer. It's sort of like Mynheer. Mynheer Magito.
So that is Dutch for Mr.
That's Dutch for Mr. So he's Mr. Magito.
Yes, yes.
See, goodness me.
And it's such an interesting clue because it suggests that the Magito surname may well be, at least at this time in the 18th century, from the Netherlands?
I mean, I don't know. The rope dancing area of my family is something that I'd never really thought of before.
Well, I'm not 100% sure that these rope dancers are related directly to Henry Alexis Magito or Magito, the musician. It's just a curious clue as to the origin of the surname, I would say.
Yes. Well, I think this is a clue that needs to be followed up. I shall be very disappointed if I don't have rope dancing in my family.
Well, here's your lead, I think.
Well, this is really fascinating. It seems that there is some kind of music in the family, going back a bit, with this Henry Alexis, interestingly named Magito, as I now have adopted his surname. I'm really intrigued by this character.
Andrew has travelled to the Netherlands on the trail of his 5 times great-grandfather, the musician Henry Alexis Magito.
I wonder how far below sea level we really are here.
His first stop is the National Archive at The Hague to meet music historian Professor Rebecca Arendt.
Well, I'm here on a bit of a quest. We come across a character called Henry Magito.
And in fact, we have found out quite a deal more about Henry and about Henry's family here in the Netherlands. I have a couple of documents here for you. The first one is directly related to your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Henry. And if you look all the way down in the corner here, you'll see that this is a baptismal record.
So here we have it. 1732, the 29th of June, Alexius Magito.
His full name was Johannes Alexis.
And Huberta van Hassel gave birth to Henry. So that has to be my 5th times great-grandfather.
So we have made a little family tree here.
So here we have Johannes Magito and Huberta. Mm-hmm. And that's Henry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They had many children.
Yeah, there are mojitos all over the place. Whole place is crawling with mojitos.
Indeed.
And what is this? This
is a contract.
Contract and obligation, 19th of May, 1727. Johannes Alexis Magito and Alexis Magito, owners of the tent or attraction called the Great Italian Show, have agreed that the first 2 parties shall freely provide their tent, including its set decoration and props, for the successful presentation of the Italian show at the upcoming Leiden Fair. Well, they obviously were theatre people then.
At this time, the kind of theatre that they were doing was the trendiest kind of musical shows. We're thinking of masks and dance and acrobatics and lots of music. It was, in effect, the musical theatre of the 18th century.
Well, that is very interesting.
Andrew now knows that the parallels between him and his ancestors go beyond music. His 6 times great-grandfather, Johannes Magito, was part of an extended family of travelling showmen and musicians. And like Andrew, they were also successful theatrical entrepreneurs. The Great Italian Show, presented in the family's own giant tent, toured the Netherlands, attracting huge audiences with music, song, and spectacle.
But here's something else.
Well, it's another mojito. As if there are more and more mojitos everywhere we look. Sir Peter Magito.
Mm-hmm. So this says, the renowned Dutch rope dancer, and this is a wooden shoe.
Oh, that's a shoe. Now, why's the shoe there?
One of his most famous numbers was dancing on the rope wearing wooden shoes.
A sort of clog dancer?
Yes, but on the rope.
That is another act. I mean, goodness, this family, you know, they could bring Britain's Got Talent's got nothing on it.
He also did it on ice skates.
On ice skates, on a rope. Interesting character.
Mm-hmm.
With that name, were they Italian?
Not Italian. So here is a document. This is the banns of marriage.
And this is going quite a way back. And that seems to be March, is it 1675?
Yes.
Alexander Macito of Dunkirk.
So this is the father of Johannes Alexis.
Okay.
So this is your 7 times great-grandfather.
Who is French.
Mm-hmm. When people moved around, they tended to adapt their names to reflect more how they were pronounced.
Would you pronounce it Magito?
Magito.
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 Oh, I prefer Magito.
By following the family line all the way back to his 7 times great-grandfather Alexander Macito, Andrew has discovered the Magitos were originally from France. By the 18th century, they'd settled in the Netherlands. When Henry Magito, Andrew's 5 times great-grandfather, was born. Just like Andrew, Henry had a musical brother called Alexis Magito, Andrew's 6 times great-uncle.
Look at this.
So this is basically an advertisement, is it? Mr. Alexis, master of the cello, with Mrs. Barberini, Italian singer, will give a concert at the Hall of the College of Music on the Vredenburg on Monday, the 4th of February at 5 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, and we see here, this is Alexis, the
Yes.
son of Johannes.
Yes.
By this point in his career, he's decided to use as his stage name merely Mr. Alexis.
I see.
And he apparently was a fantastic cellist.
Yes, extraordinary, because, of course, my brother is a cellist. On the one hand, we seem to have, in the family, we seem to have a serious side with a really fine cellist. And on the other side, we seem to have showmen who took their tent around with their Italian show. We seem to have a rope. We got this character with his ropes. And it's just kind of remarkable because it's a kind of mixture of serious music and showbiz, which of course is kind of the area I live in. This clearly shows where the music comes from. I mean, although it's so far back in the family, though, that I mean, looking at the cellist, I mean, we're talking the beginning of the 18th century. But it's extraordinary how something like that could surface because, I mean, it's not as if it's a particularly common instrument. All of this seems to be on the showman performance side. What isn't there is writing, isn't the composing.
In an astonishing twist of fate that could be the plot of one of his own musicals, Andrew's ancestors are a perfect match for him and his own brother Julian. Keen to find out more about his cello-playing 6 times great-uncle Alexis, Andrew has come to Leiden, where Alexis once lived, to meet musician Elske Tinbergen.
How do you do? Hello. Hello.
I'm Elske.
Hello. Hold on. How do you do? Very good to see you. Good to see you. And so what is this piece?
Well, it's a cello sonata
Yes.
by one of your ancestors,
Really?
by Alexis Magito.
This is very, very exciting. One of the things I was really intrigued by was whether there was any composer in my family whatsoever. Now it's all revealed.
I've been doing a lot of research
Yes.
about this particular person, and I've played all 6 sonatas
Have you?
in concerts.
So he wrote 6.
I found an auction catalogue from 1764 mentioning not only these sonatas but also some concerti which he composed. Unfortunately, not found yet. But
Don't know where they are.
No. Whether they're still out there somewhere, I have no clue, but I hope to find them one day.
Well, that's fantastic.
I did a lot of research, especially on him. I wrote a PhD some years ago.
Did you?
And
Yes.
he was a big part of that.
Well, that's extraordinary. So
And I want to show you the cover. Maybe you can have a look at it.
Yes, Alexis Magito, yes. Printed for the author and sold by, I can't read his name.
John Wynne.
John Wynne, at his shop in Cambridge. I wonder if that implies he went there.
Yeah, I think you have to go there to find out more.
Well, I think I probably have to, yes. Well, this is really a very remarkable moment for me because, I mean, here we have my 6 times great uncle. I would have never guessed that not only was he a virtuoso cellist, but also a composer and also clearly wrote concerti as well. And I know a little bit from having worked with my brother Julian, who obviously is a phenomenal cellist. Look at all of this. You know, this is stuff to really, really show that you can play. And until we got here, I hadn't realized that there was anybody who was a composer, let alone a composer for the cello and a fantastic cellist, clearly. Because you had to be a fantastic cellist to play this. It really, really is something that I could not possibly have dreamt of. All I can say, I'm blown away.
Back in the UK, Andrew is following the trail to Cambridge, where his 6 times great uncle Alexis Magito's compositions were published in 1765. He's meeting music librarian Dr. James Clements at King's College.
I'm struggling to think what Mr. Magito would have been doing in Cambridge with the scores apparently for sale in London.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, he definitely was here. He was over in Cambridge by about 1760, and we have various pieces of evidence here that I can show you. And maybe we should start with the first one, which is a copy of an engraving that hangs on the wall in our music library here at King's Library, and it dates from 1767 or thereabouts.
Oh my goodness. Brilliant, a concert. This is Alexis here.
Yes. The cellist.
Yeah.
Yes, the very cheerful looking cellist.
He's not looking as though, you know, his work has sort of gone to #1 in the charts.
No.
This one. He's looking a little bit sour, but he's right pole position in the middle, is he not?
Yes. So maybe that gives us an indication.
Everybody else seems to be quite jolly.
I know.
But Alexis is having a bit of a rough day.
Yeah, he's taking his music making very seriously.
Oh dear.
Do you recognise any of the other names?
Hellendahl.
We know that Hellendahl, when he was in London, would perform solo violin pieces in the intervals in Handel's operas.
So he's obviously in pretty distinguished company.
Yes. This is from 1764, from the Cambridge Chronicle.
Grand concert for Mr. Hellendahl at Trinity College Hall on Thursday the 29th, where the following pieces will be performed. Overture by Mr. Handel, then, goodness, Third Concerto solo by Mr. Alexis.
Yeah.
So to have performed at a hall such as Trinity, he would have had to have been pretty well known.
I think so, yes. And I think the fact that his name is on this advertisement is he's a big deal. He's a draw for audiences to come to this concert.
Very interesting.
The other thing that draws this all together in a way is the fact you can buy the tickets to be had at Mr. Wynn's music shop.
And Mr. Hellendahl himself.
Yes, everywhere.
2 and 6 each.
Yes.
Seems to me that they're all sort of businessmen and impresarios.
Yes, it does look very much that way. They were performers, composers, publishers.
Yeah, they did the lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Goodness. Well, that's a lesson for all of us.
Yes.
Andrew can't wait to meet his brother Julian to share the tale of their Dutch musical heritage and its extraordinary resemblance to their own story.
Well, Julian, if I told you that we had family who were involved with presenting rope dancing acts in Holland, with a 6 times great uncle who was a composer and, at the time, Britain's leading cellist and Holland's leading cellist. If I told you that, you would completely say
how many
I'm talking
times
rubbish.
removed?
Well,
Six times?
6 times gone, yeah. And they were all called Magito. And now, you see, this is Mr. Peter Magito. And Mr. Peter Magito, he was the rope dancing expert. And he used to dance on ropes with skates.
When's this programme going out? Is it April the 1st it goes out?
No, look, here goes Alexis Magito, our great-great-great-great-great-uncle. That's his sonata for violoncello and bass cello.
I thought I was pretty well up on obscure cello music.
So
So,
in a funny way, is this quite a discovery?
Whoever played this, must have been pretty good. I mean, it's beautifully written.
Yes.
I have to say that.
I mean, look at all of this.
Yeah.
It's all pretty virtuoso stuff, isn't it?
It's not slow, is it?
No.
Way ahead.
So he was hugely ahead of his time.
Yes, would be.
And this is a picture. He looks a bit serious at him in the middle of it. And this is his little band.
Where's the rope dancer? Is he in this?
No, the rope dancer's not part of this act.
Oh, see.
This was, the Greatest Hits album cover.
Oh, right.
It's a versatile family we come from.
Evidently.
We have people who could dance in skates on ropes. We have a composer.
That's where
we have an impresario.
That's where Starlight came from.
Starlight Express was not done on ropes, Julian.
No, but it was done on skates.
It was done on skates, yes, it clearly was the beginning.
But maybe, it could be done with ropes.
We have a cellist. I think, we're going to have a new show called Magito's Got Talent with the various Majitos. Mahiti, do you think they're called?
We can get the dog in there somewhere.
Yeah. The dog, yes, we need a dog act. Well, this has been the most incredible journey for me. On my mother's side of the family, I didn't know anything about Katherine Willoughby. Astonishing story, really, and I would never, ever remotely have seen the rope dancing, all cello playing, composing early 18th century Mr. Majitos. It is extraordinary to me because there was a missing link for me, which was the music, and also something to do with the showmanship. I couldn't get that at all because actually on my father's side, knowing my father, that doesn't seem to have been part of his personality, but it clearly was there sitting in the family DNA. And these wonderful, magical Mr. Mahiti, I think, like my little dog, are wonderful, wonderful people.